In 1922, an American team was out searching for the origins of man in a remote part of China. Being an American expedition, it had an avalanche of cars, trucks, and 75 camels. Led by the flamboyant Roy Chapman Andrews, they were so well heeled, the Chinese government thought they were spies. After bandits, breakdowns, and the weather, the fossil hunters found a treasure trove. These early dinosaur detectives looking for human bones stumbled on a hoard of perfectly preserved dinosaur eggs, the first clue that dinosaurs lived in family groups. Carefully packed in camel hair, the eggs were sent back to New York. Eggs were a beginning. Dinosaurs must have had a social life, but what was it like? The question remained unanswered for 50 years.
This is the first time I've been in this place since.
Then, in 1978, an eager young fossil hunter stumbled on clues which would transform our ideas about dinosaurs. Jack Horner was looking for eggs and baby dinosaurs in America, but he didn't find them right away.
It really began, huh? Yeah. I went to the American Museum in New York City and looked through their collections, looked at the material that had come from Mongolia, and got an idea of what baby dinosaurs ought to look like. And people were writing papers about baby dinosaurs being extremely rare, and so I took it upon myself to go find some.
At first, he had no luck, but then a chance visit to Marion Brunwald's fossil shop gave him the break he needed.
Well, I said I got some of these funny little bones, so I showed him some of these bones, and he wanted to know if I had more of them. I said, yeah, over at the house.
She produced 2 small pieces, and one was the thigh bone of a duck-billed dinosaur, and one was what I believe was a rib fragment. But the thigh bone was the wrong size. It was the right size for a baby. She had a coffee can full of little pieces, and what we were looking at were, as far as I knew, North America's first true baby dinosaurs.
Horner had been searching in the wrong place. Dinosaurs nested in the hills, not in the valleys. When he realized that, he found whole colonies of breeding dinosaurs.
Jack, you've got a reputation of the keenest eye in paleontology, of being able to pick out things from a bunch of rocks like this. How about showing me how you do it? Pick out one for me. I want to see an eggshell.
Well, let's go for a walk and see if we can find something. See, here we have what? Eggshell fragments.
Those?
Yeah.
Well, now, how in the world did you see that? I would never see those little tiny things.
Eggshell is really pretty common out here. In fact, it's one of the most common fossils we have in the formation. But when we find a real concentration of thousands and thousands of pieces, then we know we have a nest.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've been doing is combing the areas looking for other nests, and we've come up with 8 more. So we know that these dinosaurs nested in colonies.
Horner had discovered the eggs of a plant-eating dinosaur. It grew up to 20 feet in length and produced eggs in clutches, 20 at a time. Weighing in at about a ton, how did these dinosaurs incubate their eggs? Did they care for and feed their young, or simply abandon them? The answers have revolutionized our ideas. The name Jack Horner gave this plant eater, Maiasaura, sums up how he believes dinosaurs behaved.
We don't know how long. Can you tell me what this is?
It's nest of a Maiasaura.
Nest of a Maiasaura. Maiasaura means the good mother lizard. When did Maiasaurs live?
A real long time ago?
80 million years ago, right? Do you think dinosaurs sat on their eggs to incubate them?
Nope.
Like birds do?
No.
Why not?
crush them.
That's right. They'd be flat, wouldn't they? That's right. So what we think is that the dinosaur, the mother dinosaur, covered the eggs with vegetation, and then the vegetation would begin to rot. And when things rot, it creates heat. And so that heat would have warmed the eggs. It's a pretty neat way to do it, isn't it?
Now, what are your clues that have led you to believe that the mother dinosaurs cared for their young?
The ends of the bones of the babies in the nest are not very well formed. They would have had a very large cartilaginous cap, which means that the babies couldn't walk. And they're little plant eaters, and therefore if they couldn't walk, we assume that the parent would bring food to them. We find some other stuff of these dinosaurs too. In fact, we find dinosaur stuff, and we call it coprolites. You know what coprolites are? Yeah, dinosaur stuff. Yeah. We find those in the nesting grounds. And so we can look at that, those coprolites, and we can tell what the dinosaurs ate. And we know that the baby dinosaurs were eating berries, like you see the mother feeding them. We have what we call a coprolite, which is dinosaur dung.
Oh.
And we had some people working on it. Looks just like a sort of a black rock.
My God.
But actually what we have here is a rock that is just loaded with plant material, all this black in here. And it's mixed together with the sediment.
When I was a dinosaur detective, that looks like a rock to me.
It certainly does.
And, but what would make you look at it like that?
What we were finding were these sort of big blobs of what appears to be crushed up plant material. It's very rare out here, but we're only finding it in the nesting ground, the nesting horizons. Another clue is the shape of the skull. When we look at the baby dinosaur skulls, they have the same features that we see in birds and mammals. They have very big eyes, big brain, very short snout. It's the characters that make things like Mickey Mouse cute. What is different about them?
Their noses.
You know, their nose is very different.
Came away.
Now, if we look at the adult has relatively small eyes and a big, long snout, right? And when we look at the babies, they have big eyes and a relatively short snout, right? Puppies are like that. If you look at a brand new puppy, they have a short nose and big eyes. They're cute, right? Some scientists think that animals feed their young if they're cute. And that's why we get fed when we're little. Because we're kind of cute, right? Yeah, well, you know, when you get to be 18, then you're not cute anymore, I guess.
Only now are we beginning to ask the questions about dinosaurs that we naturally ask about our animal kingdom. For if they lived in families, how did they communicate with one another? David Weissample thinks he knows, at least for a close relative of the good mother known as Parasaurolophus. This plant eater was 30 feet long, and on its head it had one feature that seemed made for sound, a crest 3 feet long.
How did you come to this theory that the dinosaur made sound through what would look like a horn?
Right. Well, we've got this skull. This is an animal called Parasaurolophus. And all this is bone. So that we know that when the animal breathed in, the air came in through the nostrils, went all the way to the back of the crest, and then came down this bit here, came to the back of the throat, down the windpipe into the lungs. And when it breathed out, it reversed that pattern, came back here and out here. So that if you put some sort of voice box, a sound generator here, the sound's pushed all the way through the crest and has to make that kind of sound. You can do some calculations, do some arithmetic to figure out what kinds of sounds they might have made. But the real clincher is to actually take this kind of configuration, this kind of shape, this skeletal stuff, and then make yourself a horn as well. Okay. This is a big contraption that I've made, which is the same size, it's life size of the crest of this duck-billed dinosaur, Parasaurolophus. Okay, here we go. Pretty low note, right?
Yeah, can I try it?
Hang on a second. Well, do you guys know how this would go on a Parasaurolophus?
Yeah.
Let me show you on Brent here, all right? Brent, turn your head a little bit, all right? sort of go like this, right? Where the voice box is down here, kind of where Brent's is. And they go all the way out to here and then back down and out through his nose right there. Right? You guys want? Brent, you want to try it?
Me too.
Stand up. This is the end. Buzz your lips. There you go. Whoa.
Was that for real, or was that just for the kids?
Well, no, that's actually based on a fair bit of fact from skeletal remains that we have of that particular dinosaur.
But science, of course, wants to know more. In North America, dinosaur bones get VIP treatment on the latest X-ray scanners. This is the only complete skull of a honking hadrosaur. Weissample dare not cut it open, but the X-ray pictures let him see the horn from the inside.
What we want to do today is to investigate roughly this part of the crest right here, because there's a chance that there are intricate side passages in here which would change the kinds of sound that the animal would make. Well, I think the business about the central chamber extending so far up the crest is going to make a real difference in terms of the kinds of sounds that this animal can make. Yeah. Certainly not as simple as originally anticipated. The business of actually taking pictures from the inside out is something that is not generally available for the kinds of work that we're doing. And so this provides a picture, a window on the anatomy that's not available otherwise. So yeah, it's a tremendous value. Let me ask you this, though. A dinosaur like Parasaurolophus would want to talk to, if it was a baby, it would want to talk to the grown-ups.
His wife.
Husband and wife would want to talk to each other. And they'd want to say things like, they'd want to give out warning calls. Or they'd want to say, come over here, it's time to eat.
It's time to go to bed.
Or it's time to go to bed. Or buzz off, I want to be left alone, things like that.
I love you.
Maybe even I love you.
Dinosaur detectives are now convinced that dinosaurs had more ways to communicate than just by making a noise. During courtship especially, they would have used color and adornment to get their message across.
We're all familiar with certain kinds of display structures. Peacocks have wonderful showy tails which attract females. In deer, there are the magnificent antlers of the red deer stag and so on and so forth. These are our display structures. And a number of dinosaurs had structures which were first and foremost very conspicuous. Many of the duck-billed dinosaurs had crests on the top of their heads. The horned dinosaurs had wonderful shields behind the skulls. These are structures which were clearly meant to be seen.
This dinosaur is called Centrosaurus, sharp-pointed reptile, because of the horns on the tip of its snout. A plant eater which topped the scales at 3 tons. During the mating season, it was capable of a fearsome display. Its 3-foot collar was rimmed with triangular lumps of horn-covered bone. By vigorously nodding its head, it warned off all but the most pugnacious of rivals. Not that this was without risk. With these, as with other dinosaurs, things could sometimes get out of hand.
I've been looking at injuries in duck-billed dinosaurs, and these features can tell us many interesting things about the lifestyle of these dinosaurs. And this animal has a series of ribs that have all been broken in a straight line and all rehealed to the same degree. We know that this injury occurred at the same time. And what I think is happening here is that rival males during mating times would fight over females and may have kicked at each other with the hind feet, causing these kind of injuries.
And even when you've secured a mate, there are perils still ahead.
Now, in a normal duck-billed dinosaur, the spine is nice and straight. And as you can see with this specimen, it has been buckled and pulled over to one side, as if a great weight has pressed straight down upon it. I've come to the conclusion that these injuries were caused during mating and where accidental injuries occurred during the actual act of mating. Now, these types of injuries only occur in adults and are only reflected in the very proximal or base of the tail, which is where the reproductive organs would be in this area here. I never find multiple injuries. Like I never find an animal that has mated, been injured, and then re-injured itself. So it looks like it happened once during the animal's life. Maybe the injury made it shy away from mating in the future. Who knows?
Clue by clue, the evidence mounts on the habits and social life of dinosaurs, and not just from the odd skeleton. Here in the Badlands of Alberta, Phil Curry found clues that stretched across an area the size of a football field. In 1978, his team discovered a vast bone bed of 500 centrosaurs, apparently struck down in the prime of life. But how could this have happened, and what did it mean?
Well, bone beds are actually quite common, but it's not very often we find bone beds like this where you have only one species represented. Because of the large numbers of specimens here and the fact that they didn't come from very far upstream, it's most likely that these animals died trying to cross the river in flood. Now, this may seem like a rather fantastic explanation, but in fact there are modern analogies that show it still happens today. And in fact it happens quite frequently. Not that long ago, 10,000 caribou died in northern Quebec.
Thousands of caribou carcasses line the banks of the Kaniapiskau River in northern Quebec. Inuit work crews have started collecting the caribou out of the water before it freezes in 2 or 3 weeks. The decaying carcasses were strewn along a 50-kilometer stretch of the river and are now creating a major pollution threat to aquatic life. Biologists who inspected the riverbank were shocked.
Whenever you get large groups of herbivorous animals, whether they're dinosaurs or mammals, together and they're moving in some kind of a migratory pattern, they're likely to encounter some kind of a natural disaster that will wipe out large numbers of them during the course of the migration. Given the evidence we have now from Arctic Canada and Alaska, there's a very good chance that dinosaurs were taking advantage of the high plant productivity in the Arctic, because during the summer months, with 24 hours of sunlight during the daytime, plants just produce so much food that animals will always try and take advantage of it.
Covering up to 70 miles a day, the vast centrosaur herds swept northwards in the summer toward the Arctic feeding grounds. In the autumn, as the days began to draw in, a huge migration southward would begin. This cycle of life would be repeated, echoing the seasons 70 million years ago. Today, the remains of huge herds of dinosaurs are being discovered around the world. In Montana, a vast bone bed tells Jack Horner what happened to the young myosaurs after they left the nest.
It gives us a social picture on a grand scale. This is just a tiny piece of one of our bone beds. What it is a mass accumulation of myosaur skeletons ranging from yearlings to full-grown, and our conservative estimate is 10,000 individuals. The story, that we've been able to put together is that we have these large groups of herbivores that are migrating north to south up and down this thin piece of West America.
What was this place like at the time these dinosaurs roamed these plains?
80 million years ago, the Rocky Mountains were here, but they were about 30 miles west of here. And then there was a broad plain that came from the Rocky Mountains and extended all the way into eastern Montana. It was about 300 miles, and then came to that inland seaway extended from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean.
And if you're one of a herd of, say, 1,000 hadrosaurs moving around the countryside, you couldn't stay in one place for very long, simply because that number of animals would eat themselves out of house and home very quickly indeed. So you follow the food resource. Well, an obvious parallel would be caribou. So really one can envisage the herds of hadrosaurs moving much like caribou do, with perhaps the tyrannosaurs being similar to wolves, following the herds, picking off the lame, the infirm, and the young, and having a very similar relationship that we see today in caribou and wolves.
Guided by an acute sense of smell and aided by stereoscopic vision, the Tyrannosaurus would close in. Its prey secured, this superbly designed killing machine would tear apart its catch and down it in huge gulps. Some killers are smaller but are no less fearsome. In 1964, John Ostrom made a startling discovery. A new type of killer, a small lithe animal with a razor-sharp weapon, a wickedly hooked claw on its hind foot. He called it Deinonychus, terrible claw.
But Deinonychus certainly opened up a whole new window in viewing these animals. This animal clearly indicated extreme agility, activity, perhaps even intelligence, but these were very, very sophisticated animals, unlike our previous image of what dinosaurs were about.
Here were dinosaurs at their most terrifying. They weren't just active killers. They hunted in packs.
But we found the remains of at least 4 and probably 5 different predators, Deinonychus, that apparently were killed in the process of attacking a much larger prey animal, that these animals apparently hunted in packs, like wolves, which makes a lot of sense when you realize that the animal that they were trying to, and did kill, was 5 or 10 times larger than the killer.
To combat the threat of agile predators, giants like this plant-eater Tyrannosaurus had to move fast too or perish. Some dinosaur detectives see this as evidence that they were just like the active mammals of today. Others are not so sure. The giant Brachiosaurus may provide some clues to the pace of dinosaurs.
Can you really apply these arguments to animals this size, a 40 or 30-ton dinosaur? I think not. I think there are actually models for these sorts of creatures which much more fit them to being a classic reptile. We know that the head was able to be craned up some 30 to 35 feet above the ground to reach the tops of the trees they fed on. Now, if the animal has its brain and head at that height, then there's an enormous distance that the blood has to travel to get up to the brain, and the heart will therefore have to generate a great deal of pressure to push the blood up that height. That gives the animals potential for a great deal of activity. So these actually are pretty wondrous animals because they're combining some of the best attributes of the animals that are so active today, the mammals and birds, with the economy of lifestyle that's associated with a reptile. Basically, they're dinosaurs, and that makes them something very special.
It was an egg that led Jack Horner to discover that dinosaurs were complex animals. They cared for and reared their young. It was bones like these that led an inquiring Bob Bacher to an even more radical idea. Until he came along, most dinosaur detectives assumed that dinosaurs were like lizards and crocodiles, were cold-blooded, in other words. But in the 1970s, he began a revolution. He came up with an idea, that's still controversial today. Bob, your idea is that these things were warm-blooded, huh?
Well, absolutely. I grew up in the 4th grade with brontosaurs like this in the Life magazine. Gray, stupid, slow, up to its armpits in some fetid swamp. But when I got to studying the guy, I found out that nose to tail and shoulder to toes, they had it all wrong. It saw in color. And animals that see in color have bright colors, to attract mates. So don't think of Brontosaurus as gray. Think of the bull Brontosaurus in some brilliant crimson or bright blue or a metallic green to attract a mate. Now, if you get into the heart of the matter, I mean, literally, I'm going to crawl into the cardiac chamber here, you see something astonishing. And when the penny dropped and I realized this, I just kicked myself. Why didn't I think of this before? This chamber here in the front of the chest, well, there's only one organ there, the heart.
Let me come up there and have
Sure.
a closer look at that.
Have a heart-to-heart here. This gigantic chamber housed a heart that would be hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Today, only warm-blooded active animals have huge hearts. And going aft, the hip socket, wonderful joint, designed to let this whole hind leg swing backwards and forwards in an efficient, well, like a pendulum.
This suggesting that the animal was far more active than our idea of this sloth-like creature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Evolution is very careful. Evolution doesn't build in excess stuff. It's not like the Pentagon. There are no cost overruns in Brontosaurus. Natural selection worked on this beast to give it the knee and the thigh and the lungs and the heart that it needed. And it gave them warm-blooded specifications. Pound for pound, there's more strength in these legs than there is in a modern elephant. And much more strength than in a cold-blooded tortoise. This is a biological machine designed for pumping, for moving with tremendous activity.
Well, school was never like this in my day. I'll tell you, now with the use of songs and dances and games and visuals of all kinds, these youngsters, through the use of dinosaurs, are learning about the world around them in a way that's absolutely astounding to, to dinosaurs like me.
The work of dinosaur detectives has turned dinosaurs into learning tools. Children all over the world can now explore their fantasies and learn at the same time.
They get interested in them as early as 4, and then at 5 they're very mystical, and then after that I think they start getting more interested in learning why did they die out? You know, why aren't they around anymore? Where did they live? You know, all of that sort of thing. I think they become more interested in the facts afterwards, but the young children, the kindergartners, are just interested in them just for life's sake.
I think any teacher probably jumps at the chance, because if you've got something that is a motivator, I mean, whatever it is you use, and this, I've never met a child who wasn't interested in dinosaurs in some way. And the more you read and the more you hear, the more interested you become, because there are mysteries involved, and I think mysteries are always something that turn us on.
In southern France, in the sleepy town of Esperanza, the tranquility is deceptive. Here, too, lies a mystery that has captured the imagination of the local community.
Gwen. Hi, Gwen.
It's being unraveled by these children and their very special teacher as they piece together the clues in the classroom in the hills nearby.
Gwen, qu'est-ce que c'est?
Just outside the town is a dinosaur nesting site which the children have made their own. So many eggs have been found that it has put Esperanza on the map and made these junior dinosaur detectives the talk of France.
All children are interested in dinosaurs. That's true. Everyone is aware of it, from 7 to 77. Those in Esperanza in particular, because they have had the opportunity to touch the bones and the eggs on the site.
Les os, les œufs. superbe. Prêtez-moi ça là. Attends. Oh, superbe.
The eggs are those of a giant Hypsilosaurus. Yet for all their size, they must have tiptoed with great daintiness between nests crowded with babies. Such discoveries may bring fame and fortune to Esperanza. The eggs may be the key to its economic future.
In fact, what you've seen today is only an exhibition, a small temporary exhibition. But the town council, the mayor, have much more important plans for exhibiting the whole of the collections. We hope to create a museum of the upper valley of the Aude, a regional museum of great importance, which is likely to bring a revival, a lift, to the economy of Esperanza, which has great need of it. And we think that this museum will attract many tourists, many people from all over Europe.
In America, too, the thrill of a fossil find can capture the minds of children. Some already are dinosaur detectives in the making.
Isn't this where you found yours there?
Yeah.
Well, sit down. I'd like to hear more about how you found it.
One day, me and my dad were walking down this creek, and I saw these teeth, like right in here, sticking out in the rock.
That's a pretty neat job. These dinosaurs are pretty interesting. This one that you found, Thad, is a plant-eating dinosaur. It's probably about 113 million years old or so. This other one that you found was a plant eater as well. This was a little baby. It was found washed out to sea and is only about maybe 98 million years old or something like that. Why do you like dinosaurs?
I wanted to find out what animals ate what other kind of animals.
What do you want to be when you grow up, Thad?
I'm going to be a dinosaur finder, a paleontologist, a scientist that finds bones.
Well, you know, a lot of people find fossil dinosaurs when they're just out looking. A lot of them. You don't have to be a paleontologist to find one. You can just be someone that likes to look.
From the earliest pioneers, it's been dedicated amateurs who have often made the most spectacular finds. Searching out dinosaur bones is a passion of Kathy Wankel. Her obsession paid off one weekend while exploring the Badlands of Montana.
It was Labor Day weekend of 1988. My husband and I were hiking around this area. I had spotted a small ridge of white sticking out of the dirt. We walked over about in this area. I knew it was a dinosaur bone. I could see the bone marrow, and I had picked up fossils before, and I just knew it was, and I was really hoping it was a T-Rex. I just had a feeling that it might be. I don't know if it was premonition or what, but I was real excited about it. I thought it was a mega find. That's what I called my dad and told him it was a mega find. And he said, oh, it's probably just some old cow bones. He didn't have faith in me.
Jack Horner did, and Kathy Wankel's T-Rex has become the latest star exhibit at the Museum of the Rockies.
Good amateur paleontologists are extremely important. There are only a few of us paleontologists in Montana, and the state is 600 miles long and 400 miles wide, and there are lots and lots of areas that have good fossils in them. So eyes out looking for us are what we need. In fact, in our museum, we have 6 or 7 big exhibits, and all of the specimens we have were found by amateurs. The important thing is that the amateur bring it to the museum rather than take it home and put it in his garage.
How did you first get interested in dinosaur bones?
Oh, I think it dates back to the uranium days when we were prospecting for uranium. I found this big humerus, that's the upper arm bone, and it's now in the Smithsonian, but finding this big bone kind of set us off on that.
I've been looking around this quarry, for instance, and it looks to me like bones look like rocks. I don't know how an amateur would ever tell one from a rock.
Bones do look like rocks, and you have to learn how to distinguish a rock. A bone has cell structure, just like our bones in our body. You know, we have cell structure. Wood has grain. So I look for that cell structure, and it's there if you look for it. And it's just like anything else. You learn to know what you're looking for.
But you can see that just with the naked eye as you walk across a bunch of rock?
Yes, after a while. Mm-hmm.
Vivian Jones has walked these hills of Colorado for 40 years. Her numerous discoveries have helped dinosaur Jim Jensen uncover some major finds. How did you discover this particular site?
Well, I was looking over this little opening on this hillside, and I found this very strange shaped bone, and I did not know what it was, so I decided to take it home and put it up until I saw Jim the next time to get it identified.
What were you doing with them?
Well, at first we were just kind of storing them, not knowing what to do with them, and then Jim came by, and he was our savior.
In what sense was he your savior?
Well, he just asked us if we would work with them if we were to find anything, and we were more than happy to do that.
And as a result of that, they made a tremendous contribution to science, actually, because of the finds they made. I was able to open up 4 quarries in these mountains and recover the most new dinosaurs that anyone's ever found.
Today, chance discoveries are being helped by science. Dinosaur hunters use technology to detect what the eye cannot see. That's the theory, anyway.
Okay, that looks good.
In practice, finding dinosaurs is still, shall we say, a hit-and-miss affair.
Got a misfire, wait a minute.
Roland, you know it's all your fault that we got involved in all this confusion
Wait
here.
a minute. You led me on by saying paleontology was in the Dark Ages and we needed to do some real science.
Well, that we were in the Dark Ages then, and I think we still are.
Ready?
I'm ready, arm it.
Ready?
Seriously, this all began when I gave a seminar at Los Alamos and challenged scientists like Roland and others here into helping us conduct this excavation. The specific problem that I posed was, can we see the bones in the ground before we excavate them? And the reason I needed to know the answers was that we had 10 feet of rock to remove before we could get down to bone level if this skeleton were to continue into the hill the way we projected. Okay, Cliff, show us some bones here. What do you got?
Time will tell whether high-tech can reveal all about this particular dinosaur. It's called Seismosaurus, and it may turn out to be the biggest dinosaur ever. But that's not all. The bones found so far are in the same position they had in life, articulated, and that's a crucial lead for dinosaur detectives.
Probably the most important feature about this skeleton is the fact that it's articulated. The reason we like to have articulated skeletons is that it allows us to know exact positions for each bone, and that's important in our descriptions and analytical work. In this case, the articulation was also important because we have a series of stomach stones that were found in direct association with the bones, like the stones in this circle, which are the gastroliths that were used for grinding food. They represent the substitute for teeth. In the sauropod dinosaurs, the teeth were about the size of my finger. They couldn't grind food. Instead, all they could do was rake food off the vegetation. And there was no grinding mechanism at all in the jaws. The only capacity for processing food mechanically was with gastroliths, grinding in a grinding mill so that the food would be crushed and processed, readied for chemical digestion in the stomach. And it's a fair estimate to say that they ate around a ton, or 2,000 pounds of food in a day. They processed that much plant material. Like any scientific investigation, there's always a wild card. The wild card in our study is the occurrence of this gastrolith, which is so much larger than elsewhere. We were astonished. This one weighs over 2 pounds, and it's 5 or 6 times larger than this one. One idea we have is that perhaps this was the one that caused the extinction of this individual when he choked to death.
However that Seismosaurus died, giants like him survived, generation after generation, for 130 million years. But how did they manage to survive for so long?
In fact, all dinosaurs would fit in the same size range as our known range of living and fossil mammals. So the question really ought to be, why aren't more mammals dinosaur size? Because they certainly can get to be that big. Well, I think it's something to do with the difference in reproduction between mammals and dinosaurs. Large mammals, like elephants, only have one young every 3 or 4 years, whereas dinosaurs we know could lay 20 eggs at a go and may have bred more often. As the Ice Ages, the large mammals were the ones that went out, probably because when they had a bad winter or something, and many of them died, they couldn't rapidly rebuild their populations. Now, a dinosaur laying 20 eggs, sure, under most conditions, most of those young would die, but it would mean they had the capacity to rebuild populations quickly, which would be impossible for a mammal.
Today, those dinosaur corpses have brought a not always welcome new enterprise. For hard on the heels of the amateurs has come a new gold rush. Professional dinosaur hunters like Peter Larson walk a thin line between making money out of dinosaur finds and scientific research.
Well, there is a bit of a controversy about being able to actually sell dinosaur bones. Actually, this is a way that I've found to be able to do what I want with my life. Those of us who work in this company have a real commitment to science. It's our thing. We not only supply specimens of dinosaurs to museums who otherwise would not be able to afford to get them, or perhaps places like Japan, which really has no dinosaur skeletons. The only way they can see a real dinosaur is to buy one. And the children who live in Japan have just as much right to see a dinosaur as the children who live here in the United States. And here we have an abundance of dinosaurs, and we can supply dinosaurs to those museums where they otherwise would not be able to have them.
In the summer of 1990, Peter Larson came up with the find of his life.
Well, this turns out to be the largest Tyrannosaurus that has ever been found. We'd kind of like to name our fossils when we find them to give them sort of a personality. It was found by Susan Hendrickson, so we came up with the name Sue. Sue is going to be the cornerstone of our museum, which we've been working on, in fact, which I've been dreaming of since I was a little kid. And Sue will be mounted in Hill City, South Dakota in our new museum.
Although Larson didn't know it at the time, Sue may be a fitting name for this, the largest tyrannosaur ever. Its size probably meant that Sue was a female and more than able to stand her ground against a smaller male. She needed to be larger to nurture the eggs inside her. Such new information is grist to the mill for amateur dinosaur enthusiasts. Tom Strauss, here in the shed at the bottom of his garden, is an engineer by day. His obsession with dinosaurs lacks the resources for anything but a one-man exhibition. But his homemade movies have won him a delighted, if limited, audience.
When I was a kid, I was fascinated by dinosaurs by the original motion picture of King Kong. From that moment on, I had an urge to do my own motion picture. The project started off when I was in high school. At the time, money was very scarce. I used these wire keys from a guitar of mine. And primarily, most of this is from bicycle chains and washers, nuts and bolts. That was generally what was available for me. And in order to keep this creature suspended in air while you're animating them one frame at a time. In the beginning, I had no experience on it, and I had to learn, and I kind of felt the best way to learn is to do it. At the time, people felt that the dinosaurs were very cold-blooded, and I really didn't believe it. And I wanted also to project these animals to show that they had feelings toward their offspring. I knew that the fight scene was terrifying. And I did have an audience of kids viewing my film. When I was showing this to this group of kids, and I took my eye off the screen and watched the faces on the kids, and especially the point where the fight was going on, and some of the reactions from these kids were they were covering their faces and they turned their head. It totally electrified me.
Dinosaurs to kids are particularly exciting because they're bigger than houses and things, and they're exciting to kids, and they're scary, but they don't have to worry about them anymore because they're gone. So it's something they can talk about and feel like they're their friends of this big 60-foot tall brachiosaurus, but at the same time, they don't have to worry about getting stepped on by one.
My favorite dinosaur is Tyrannosaurus Rex. They're interesting and they're big, so big. They're real neat and fascinating. They're big and scary.
Stimulating that imagination is a young people's dig and campsite at Egg Mountain. It's an open-air workshop inspired by Jack Horner.
We saw some children out there today, a very bright little 9-year-old fellow. Tell us something about the camp. I mean, what is it exactly?
Well, it's run as a field school. It's a place where interested people can come out and really be part of the research, be part of what really goes on here.
Since Jack Horner first discovered dinosaur eggs in America in 1978, hundreds of children of all ages have spent time on Egg Mountain. For Horner, it's the climax of a long career.
What would you like to be remembered for?
Probably the behavior. That's been what I've been working on all this time.
Behavior of the dinosaurs?
Behavior of the dinosaurs, yes.
This is what dinosaurs are good for: education and learning about life and the history of life, so that we know what our world is about and what's going to happen to our world. They should be used for research and education. They should be used to encourage people like Johnny and Thad into science.
And of course, the biggest joy in fossils is the actual discovery, actually finding these rocks which no one's ever seen before, these evidence of ancient life. And we just can't deny that to the young kids, because that's what really gets you hooked on fossils and really gets you hooked on science. And we've got to allow them to be able to go out and look for these fossils and find them, because without the kids, there's no future in paleontology.
Bob, of all your discoveries out here, what would you like to be most remembered for?
Wow. I guess helping to give dinosaurs better respect. That they weren't cold-blooded, stupid, gray, dim-witted, bad mothers and stuck in miasmic swamps. They were lively, they were colorful, incredibly interesting.
Jack Horner and others revolutionized our idea of dinosaurs. Out went the idea that they were lumbering, slumbering giants. Now we know that they were among the most successful creatures that ever lived on this planet. But if that's the case, why did they die out? Well, some think it was a mass extinction. Others are not so sure. And did all the dinosaurs die out, or perhaps did some survive in a different form? For some clues to the death of the dinosaurs, join me for our next episode.